Hey there, it's Hank Gaming coming to you from the locker room. Now, you might be wondering, why am I wearing a hockey helmet? I'd like to share with you one of my most favorite stories. See, there's times in our lives where we have a split second to make a decision, and that decision that we make changes everything from there on out. So this is a story about a time in my life where I had to make that quick decision. I was 15 years old. I was 135, maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. I mean, I was small, and I got an invite to go to a tryout camp for the Springfield Junior Blues, who was one of the premier junior hockey teams in North America at the time. Now, they called it a tryout. I really think it was a moneymaker for the team because, quite frankly, I had no business being there. Yet I was just good enough to get the invite. So I was 15 years old, and we were playing a game, and we got into a scrum in front of the net. And I was a defensive player, and I wasn't really known for my goal-scoring abilities. I was just a good defensive player. So we got a scrum going in front of the net. Next thing you know, I'm in this scrum, and my helmet gets popped off like that. And so I back up, and I back out, and I'm going down to pick up my helmet. And what do I see there on the ice? I see a pair of gloves. So I thought, heck, I'm picking up my helmet. I was always taught good sports, so I'll pick up this guy's gloves. So I go to pick up my helmet, and I'm about to put it on, and I hand the guy my gloves, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "You dropped these." He goes, "Yeah, we're going." And I said, "Where are we going?" He goes, "We're fighting." And I thought, dude, you're a man. You've got facial hair, you're big. I don't want to fight you. And I remember saying that. I was like, I don't want to fight you. And he goes, "You don't have a choice." And what I realized was I didn't have a choice. See, I knew it was at that moment I either needed to stand up for myself or I was going to regret not fighting him. And it's amazing how fast so many things can go through your mind. So we're in the defensive zone, and you guys know the face-off circle. We were to the left-hand side of the net, and I remember backing up and saying, "All right, this is it." My dad told me later, he's like, "Hank, don't fight him. Hank, don't fight him. Hank, don't fight him." And we squared up, and everybody circled around the circle, and they're banging their sticks. They're like, "Go, kill him!" And I was like, "Oh, crap." And so we square up, and I remember squaring up, and the next thing I remember was like, bang, 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 and I think I threw a punch. I'm not sure. My knuckles didn't hurt. And I remember feeling something in my head, yet it didn't really hurt. It was kind of like slow motion. And so finally I was like, this is crazy. And I pulled the guy down on top of me. So I'm looking up at him like this. And it was like everything was in slow motion. He goes, "Ugh." And he spit right on my face. I don't know how you feel about spitting, let alone spitting in someone's face. It's like one of the most disgusting, it's just pathetic, right? And I remember sitting there and letting that spit sit on my face before I wiped it off. And I took a mental picture. I said, this will never happen to me again. See, I wasn't prepared. I hadn't hit the weight room like I needed to be out on that ice. I wasn't physically in a place where I should be out on the ice with guys of that caliber. And I said, you know what? This is my fault. I wasn't prepared for this opportunity. I will never let this happen again. And it was interesting because when he did that, everybody turned on him. Everybody turned on him because that wasn't what their team was about. See, their team was about teamwork and about being sportsmen. And what he did went completely against everything the team was preaching. And it was interesting because a lot of the veterans were coming up to me and apologizing. And what I didn't know was there was another team there, a farm team that was there looking for talent. And there was a team called the Toledo Cherokees that was scouting me. And they wanted to see if I had enough heart. So they actually sent him out there to see how I would respond when I was challenged, when I was back into a corner. See, as soon as I was willing to fight, the Toledo Cherokees made up their mind. They drafted me. See, they drafted me because all they wanted to see was I was small, yet they saw I had some grit. They wanted to see if I was willing to stand up for myself, and as soon as I dropped the gloves and went, that's all they needed to see. It didn't matter if I won the fight or lost the fight. They didn't care. They wanted to see what kind of heart that I had. Now, I remember talking with Chuck LeMay, and Chuck LeMay once said, he goes, "Hank, you know, if you didn't fight him, we weren't going to draft you." Now, the interesting thing was, after my senior year, what happened was I was either going to go play for the Toledo Cherokees or I was going to move out to Colorado and be a ski bum. I had $500. I mean, $500 in a Jeep Wrangler full of gas is plenty of money to get out to Colorado, right? So that kind of gives you a picture into the mindset that I have is, $500 in a full tank of gas, I can go out to Colorado and start over. Well, thankfully, I was just good enough to get on the team with the Toledo Cherokees. In the first year, I was game to game. I'd go to the game and I'd see if my name was on the list. And a lot of times I wasn't playing. And I was just good enough to get on the team. Well, the next year I ended up making a team called the Billings Bulls. And I went out to Billings, Montana. And went out there. And when I went out there with a broken hand. And that's another great fighting story. It's already long enough. So I have a problem when people bully people. I'm not one much to pick a fight. Yet, kind of like what went on with our Des Moines family, there was some bullying going on there. And if you look, I helped raise probably more money than anybody else for the Des Moines family. And there was an instance where we were in a tryout, and there was a guy running around just taking people's heads off. I mean, just running people and kids that shouldn't be there. Well, it reminded me of when Ty pulled me, spit in my face, and I was like, this is what this guy's doing to the other people. And he went into the corner, and he just ran over this guy. I mean, I say guy, he was a little kid. And when he was skating away, I said, you know what, this has got to stop here. And so I skated behind him, and I took my stick, and I just whacked him. I whacked him right behind the knees, and when this guy turned around, he pops his bucket off, and this guy had no neck. I mean, literally, when he turned around, he was one big muscle, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And so I dropped my gloves, and he came at me, and I remember just closing my eyes and throwing the hardest punch I've ever threw, and I was like, ah! And I threw the punch, and before I knew it, I was like, bam, 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 bam! And I got hit 3 times fast. I mean, this guy was a fighter, and faster than I've ever been hit, so I looked down, and there was blood everywhere. I mean, just everywhere. It was all over my jersey, all over the ice. My eye was throbbing, so I pulled him down, and I was like, dude, you messed up my eye. And he goes, look at my nose. His nose was actually sticking out of his skin. Now, why do I tell you this story? There's going to be times in your life where you've got to make a decision. Now, I'm not one that's a proponent of fighting yet. If someone backs you into the corner, you know what, you may not have a choice or not, and you may have to fight. And whether you win that fight or not, it's maybe one of those big moments in your life where you had a choice. Now, oftentimes in life, we regret things that we didn't do more than the things that we do. So why am I telling you all this? Let's go back to the Toledo Cherokee, the Toledo Cherokees. Now, I was just good enough to get on the team my first year, and then I went out to Billings, and I went out there with a broken hand because in that fight I shattered, and you kind of see how that knuckle's off, and that knuckle sticks out. And yes, I still have a little bit of nail polish on for my 2-year-old. It is what it is. So when I went out there, out there with a broken hand, and then I ended up breaking some ribs, and they released me. I went from being on the first place team to the last place team in the league, and I asked for my release, and I went back to Toledo, and it was going to be my last year. We're just going to have some fun, and we made it all the way to the national championship game, and maybe I'll put a picture up there, and we became runners-up in that game. Now, I don't know if you've ever come that close to being the best at something. I mean, we were within one period of winning that game, and I remember after the game standing up and saying, I'm in. Let's come back and win the thing. Who's with me? And many of us were ready to retire at that point, and we all came back with one goal. And that one goal was to win the national championship. See, the first year, all I wanted to do was get on the team, and that was good enough. I was happy. That was my goal. My goal was to just get on the team. In fact, I remember looking back, and our goal that year was just to get to the national championship. The next year, we had a goal to win the national championship, and we had commitment for it. I mean, we did dryland, we did weightlifting. We had a goal and we had commitment, yet there was something lacking. Now, the third year when we came back, I ended up being the captain of the team. In fact, I hadn't even scored any goals in 2 years of juniors. That year, I had only scored 3 goals. So in 3 years of junior hockey, I scored 3 goals. Yet I was the captain of the team. And we had one goal. We had a goal of winning the national championship. See, we had a goal. We had commitment, and the third most important thing that we had was belief. We believed that we could win the national championship, and I believe that was the difference. So here's the interesting thing. We go out to Simi Valley, California, and no one even mentioned her name. I remember walking into the banquet beforehand, and our flight got in late, and we're walking in, and we walked in like we own the place. I mean, I wish it would have been filmed. And we walked in, and they were saying, well, who are the big contenders this year? They didn't mention us. We were runners-up the year before. We had only lost, I think, 3 games the whole season. We had tied like 7. I mean, our record was phenomenal, and they didn't even mention us as a contender, and we were like, oh, no, you didn't. So we went and we were watching this game, and I remember watching the game, and there was this guy out there, and he was a badass. I mean, I remember seeing him check people, and I'm like, oh, my gosh. If that guy hits me, it's going to hurt. Of course, I put the energy out there that I was going to have a chance to get hit by this guy. And sure enough, first period of the first game, we're playing this team. And the guy's skating at me, and I had a choice. I could hang on to the puck a little bit longer and take the hit so my forward could get the puck and move on, and the guy didn't have a chance to peel off. And so that's what I decided to do. I knew I was going to take the hit, and I passed the puck off. Next thing I remember, I'm knocked out. I mean, I'm on the bench. I got knocked out. There's a movie where Friday, you got knocked out. It was kind of like that. So, of course, back then, concussions weren't that big of a deal. And the coach was like, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. And so I went back out. And the next shift, when I went back out, I was literally like skating around and the plays going by me, and I had no clue. I had a really bad concussion, and we didn't really track them back then yet. That was probably a 6th, 7th, or 8th concussion that year. And I remember sitting up and talking with the doctors, and they said, you're done. And I said, what do you mean I'm done? I'll be fine for next game. They're like, no, you've had a really bad concussion, your brain's swollen, you could die. Now imagine being 19 years old. Everything that you worked to up to this point is right there. I mean, all the times you went to the weight room, the miles that you put on the bike, the traveling to Marquette with your dad in snowstorms, and everything that you worked to was to this moment. And now it's being taken away from you. And I remember at 18 or 19 years of life realizing that I could die. And the decision was made that I couldn't play anymore. So imagine being first game of the national tournament and you get knocked out. And I remember I was in a tough spot mentally, and someone on the team took my jersey and hung it up by the door, and they said, hey, you got us here. We'll take it from here. And I remember thinking, wow. And our team went on and won that. Yet I've kind of had a chip on my shoulder ever since then. I've had a chip on my shoulder that, yeah, we won the national championship, but yet it kind of has that asterisk by it, right? So when the rest of the guys stuck around and stayed in the apartment, and boy, if those apartments could tell a story, I went home and I bought my first rental property April 1st of 1998. And I felt like I had something to prove. And many of you guys know the story. We went on, we bought 42 rental properties, ended up going broke, and that's for another video. And so why do I tell you all this? Sometimes you got to be just good enough to get on the ice, just good enough to get on the team. And then once you get there, how hard you work will determine what your success is. You don't always have to be the most talented. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the brightest. You don't have to be the most polished. What you've got to do is you've got to show up and work. See, I have a track record of being just good enough to get on the team. I showed that in the bold room. I mean, they sent me to Fargo, North Dakota in January for my first assignment, and we ended up launching it. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Be just good enough to get out there and then work. There's a great book by Grant Cardone called 10X. Watch that book, or read that book, listen to that book. He talks about you've got to work hard. You've got to outwork everybody else. And there's another great book that Aaron Caraway sent to me. It was called Take the Elevator. Frankly, it wasn't that great of a book, or Take the Stairs. And that book summed up was, there's no elevator to the top of success. You got to take the stairs. You got to frickin' work. You got to put the hours in. You got to be willing to do the grind. My question is, are you willing to put in the work, or are you just going to be whiny? Are you going to say, oh, it didn't work out for me? Well, how many frickin' contacts have you made in the last week? How many frickin' contacts have you made in the last day? Are you waiting to get ready? So here's what I'm going to say is, if you have a goal, go get it. You know what? The first year is probably going to be tough. Heck, I'm in my garage right now. I've got the heater off. It's freaking cold out. I went for my dream job. Yet, you know what? I'm going to make this work. Why? Because I don't give up. And the more you push me, the more I'm going to fight. And the more chip on my shoulder I'm going to get. I will make this successful. Just like you will make 2016 successful if you make the choice to do it. See, here's the thing is, it's up to you if you want to be successful. So quit complaining, stop being a victim, and go frickin' do it! Woo!